Hey, Streams of Light podcast. Chris Anthony with you here on just a chilly day in Southern California. So glad you joined us today. Today I'm going to look at this cosmic element in life. And this is something that I know may sound a little funky for some of us who are very grounded to science and whatnot, but it's actually in the science. It's about overcoming what I would call cosmic darkness. And that I know that's a very, how would you say, dramatic title. But I want to start with full moons, because that's probably the closest to home when it comes to, this cosmic interaction between our lives and the elements. You know, the full moons, we know from hospitals and police departments and such that things pick up around the full moon. That, we know that the moon, when it's full and new moons and full moons, both, pull on the tides dramatically. And so as a surfer, we always know that when we're looking to surf around the new moon or the full moon, we're always looking to see what's the tide doing. And if it's a full moon or new moon, we're always very careful, because the extremity of the tides on the moon's pull and push on the water is really, it's really quite dramatic. So we are, as human beings, 70-some% water. And I think that would explain, why we see such a powerful change around the times of new moon and full moon, as far as police departments and hospitals getting so busy. And, the word lunatic comes from the word lunar. And I've noticed in my own life, my own experience is that around the time of the full moon or new moon, those are the times when I look back over my life, especially when I was younger. I look back and I see, wow, what was I thinking? Why did I go out drinking on a full moon? What did I do last night or whatever? Yeah, so the full moons are definitely, it's a cosmic pull on the bodies of the ocean waters, as well as the tidal forces within our own bodies. So the question, is it real? Is there such a thing as cosmic darkness or cosmic interaction? I know the word dark is a little dark. It's a little dramatic. But sometimes we wake up in this funk and we don't know what's going on, and we will check the celestial heavens to see what's going on. Are we in the middle of some Mercury in retrograde? Right now, Venus just went into retrograde. Now we know more information than we used to. So scientifically, from an astronomy perspective, even when a planet goes into a retrograde, we used to think that the planet moved backwards. And that's why there was maybe more, folklore around those things. Now we know that the planet doesn't necessarily move backwards, but that the appearance is backwards. But yet, if you look at things like Mercury in retrograde and things like that, you will definitely see patterns, not only in your own life, but just in general. So the question is it real? Is cosmic, are the celestial bodies of the cosmos creating certain circumstances in our lives, and can it be affecting us for good or for ill? And so I would suggest yes, but the point isn't so much whether or not you believe it. As a great teacher, a great spiritual teacher, a great guru once said, he said, it's not, he said the laws of gravity were in effect before Newton came along to, sort of diagram it out for the rest of humanity and sort of prove it scientifically. The laws of gravity have always been in effect. It wasn't a matter if you believed it or not. As a matter of fact, if you didn't believe it, it could cause you harm, right? So it's not so much the question of, is it real, but how far, to what degree does it become real to us, particularly as far as body and mind? So now there's different views within different spiritual traditions on how this works. And I'm fascinated by that. In the West, many of us grew up in the Western world with the scriptures, the Bible, and there actually is a verse in the Bible that talks about the celestial bodies. And it was the Apostle Paul, I believe, in Ephesians or one of his epistles, wrote that we are no longer subject to the powers of the cosmos. And a lot of times that's translated to the heavenly bodies or powers and principalities. But, really, when you look at it, it's the heavenly powers. It's the powers of the cosmos. And so in that particular perspective, I actually like this perspective, because in this perspective, he says we're no longer subject to those cosmic forces. And I like that because essentially what that speaks to me is that these forces that are in the cosmos, the heavenly bodies, the planets, the sun, the moon, the stars, we have all kinds of things happening, right? We have solar storms happening. We have we have tides from the moon. We have the planets in retrograde. We have all these things happening. And so what St. Paul was saying in the old scriptures was that we are no longer subject to the powers of the cosmos, that by faith in the Christ that we can overcome those things. And I actually like that perspective, because in that perspective, it is the mindset of faith. If I told you, for example, I have this bangle, which they wear in the East. And so the rishis had discovered that one of the beneficial things for the body was to put like a lightning rod on the body, so to speak. Just like we have a lightning rod on a building, you can put a lightning rod on the body, like a bangle, like I'm wearing here. And it's certain kinds of metal that are twisted. And so there's nothing wrong. I mean, none of us would think there was anything wrong with a big building in like New York City, for example, getting a lightning rod on top to protect the body. Of course not. This is really no different. Lightning strikes, in thunderstorms, and we have all kinds of cosmic forces in play. Just like, we have storms within our atmosphere that strike, there's all kinds of forces in play outside of our atmosphere that come into the atmosphere. So just like a building might have a lightning rod installed, there's nothing wrong with, so many people these days are into, crystals and the bangles and things like that could potentially defer some of the cosmic energy that is in our own existence. So there's different perspectives from different spiritual faith families. In the West, it's the faith. If you believed, even if this thing on my wrist didn't work, if you believed it would work with all your heart, it just might work, right? Because we know the mind is very powerful. We know that the mind can release chemicals, for example, in the body, hormones, chemicals in the body that are much more powerful than even pharmaceutical drugs. We know this. And so that's why they take into account the placebo effect in all the studies. So if you believe it, then even if the actual thing you're wearing necessarily scientifically isn't making a change, if you can believe it, that's a very powerful thing. So there's the different perspectives from the different faith families, but really it's all about how to overcome. Like, for example, in my life, once I realized, gosh, yeah, that full moon, man, what the heck? Why do, I started realizing the pattern where if I was maybe not a happy person at that point in my life, if I was sad, if I was going through a difficult time, the likelihood of me getting caught up in the lunar pull, so the tidal pull against the waters of the body, the change in my own physiology, I realized that I was much more susceptible to the cosmic powers at hand, which, by the way, are indifferent. It's not like the moon is angry at us or Mercury in retrograde is pissed off that we haven't been communicating well, and Mercury is going to put us in a point. It's neither here nor there. It's not personal, but these powers are here. So the first step of overcoming those cosmic powers is to, number one, to realize it. And that was the biggest step for me. Once I realized that I was more likely to fall into the trap around the full moon or the new moon if I was not in a good place in my life, I would actually take note. Now, sometimes I would look ahead of time and go, okay, Wednesday is when the full moon is, so watch out. But there was other times when I didn't even know the full moon was there, and I'm like getting a hankering to do this or that. And then I'm like, wait a second. And then I would look and go, no, No, better off I stay home. Better off I just get a movie and stay in. So realizing it is just, I mean, realizing it is huge. That's step number one. Realize that these things are actually real. And it's not just some crazy person on a chart somewhere, putting a curse on you, but realizing that scientifically there's solar storms, there's full and new moons, there's things going on in the stratosphere that can come into our environment. Just realizing that those things are real is step one. And then step two, of course, is to then take those actions and not get sucked into it. So not getting sucked into it is huge. That takes a little more willpower. And that brings me on to the next point, which is initiate your own power. What I found in my own life is once I realized that, wow, these cosmic forces, yeah, they're real. What I found out in my own life was I had to initiate my own power and practices that I performed on a regular basis. The dunamis, the power, so to speak, the spirit power, the power of the spirit, the Holy Spirit, if you will, the Kundalini Shakti, for those of you who dig that term. I had to initiate my own power, because it's one thing to realize, oh man, there's a full moon coming up, craziness. You can hear it, you can hear it sometimes outside. I mean, so there's been times when I was like, what's going on? And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's a full moon. And yeah, you can hear it sometimes. The windows are open. You can hear everyone raging and having fun, which is great. But I mean, how many of those people went home that night and said, I did what? Man, how come I drank that much or whatever? So having the power to actually, it's one thing to realize it, but having the power to go, you know what? I'm just going to stay in tonight, watch a movie, take it easy, whatever. That takes power. And that brings us to the point of doing our own shadow work. This podcast is about overcoming, the darkness of the cosmic dilemma and the cosmic power, overcoming, cosmic darkness. But in reality, I don't want to go on record saying that you don't look into the darker places within your own soul. I want to go on record saying that you should look in to the dark places within your own soul. Do that shadow work. See, because even if you don't like what you're looking at, when you look deep into the darker corners and the darker recesses of your own soul, your own psychological framework, even if you don't like how that looks, what ends up happening is once you realize, oh, I have this sort of lifelong trauma, goes back to when I was a child, so on and so forth. Once you find out what that is and recognize it, even if you don't like it, even if it doesn't feel good to sit with it, you're way ahead of the game, because then you start to connect the dots on why you do what you do. So I think I'm going to get someone on the line here in just a minute. By the way, I wanted to say, for those of you who, for those of you who are watching on through the Quora link, you have the link to my WhatsApp chat. So you can always, if you have a question or you have a comment, you can always chime in. And for those of you who maybe don't have WhatsApp and wanted to just ring me, make a quick call, you could do that at 760-826-3072. And if I don't get any calls in the next 5 minutes, I'll probably repeat that number. So if you didn't catch it, just get your pen and paper ready. I hate to say that, pen and paper. It's like even having to dial in numbers, it's kind of crazy. Just if you're watching on Facebook, just go to the top and there's my WhatsApp link there. If you looked at it on Quora, there's a link to WhatsApp there. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll just have to either go to my Facebook page or just get the number. So doing the shadow work. That shadow work is definitely important, because if we're going to energize ourselves through our own personal practices, which I'll talk about in a minute, the shadow work is important, because even if you had power to withstand, it's important for us to understand. It's important for me. That's what I found in my life. It was so important for me to understand what were the dark corners within my own experience. What, were the challenges I had that were driving me to identification with the lower self, with the body, seeing myself as a person in this body, living for eating, for sex, whatever it, all those drives for needing love, all those things are real. There's no shame in them. But if that's all of our identity is, then we're living in that realm of lower self. We're living in that realm of complete identity with the body, and then the software platform that runs on the body, i.e. the ego, that wants simply just to live and survive and can be desperate, quite desperate at times, right? It can be quite desperate to survive and get what it wants. They say sometimes, you're just eating your emotions, right? Well, they taste so good, right? I mean, that's what a lot of people do. A lot of people smother it with food. Other people smother it with drugs or alcohol. And I'm not saying that I've never done that or I'm above that. What I'm saying is we just need to realize that we do that sometimes. And if we realize what the life issues are and do the shadow work, then it becomes easier to implement the power part. So one of the ways to overcome the cosmic darkness that comes upon the earth in different seasons. And by the way, did you notice yesterday morning? And I noticed yesterday morning, I actually looked it up. I was like, wow, there's a certain heaviness going on right now. What is that? And I did not feel it from within. I'm pretty in touch with myself. So when I sensed that, that heaviness, I thought, wait a second, what's going on here? I really didn't sense it coming from within. And that's when I looked and I thought, oh yeah, right. Somewhere the night before, that planet of Venus was moving into retrograde. And I just, curiosity, because I wasn't certain this was it. I was like, man, could this be it? Could it be that Venus is in I know Venus is in retrograde, but could it be Venus in retrograde that is creating what I'm feeling right now, or at least part of the reason why I'm feeling what I'm feeling? So I put my feelers out to all my peeps on Quora, in my Quora space. And I said, hey, I woke up this morning, I was feeling good, and I started to feel this heaviness, and I don't have any reason for, knowing why this is happening. Does anyone feel it? And oh man, I got an onslaught of people just saying, yes, yes. And they started to share their experiences. And see, that's what I love about technology. Then I was like, okay, this is cool. It's cool to know this, that, it's cool to know that, number one, you're not alone. That's a great thing to know if you're going through like a little dark period, that you're not alone. And to know that it's a cosmic thing and that many people are experiencing it, it's really cool, because people begin to share and go, yeah, I was feeling this and that way. And I noticed that, and then you start to see what the patterns are. So that's my experience with this in the last couple of days. And then I felt like, wow, this is a real heaviness. So I want to overcome this. So one thing I've noticed is it's so important in those times to do the things that we should be, doing, getting a lot of sleep and practicing those spiritual practices. So I just keep going. Like if I'm not feeling good, it used to be the old me. When I would not feel good, then I would go, oh gosh, I wouldn't do the things I should be doing. Like I wouldn't do exercise, yoga, meditation, all those things I should be doing that keep me kind of on top and above that state of being. But sometimes getting pulled into the lower parts where, gosh, I'm not feeling good. Maybe I'll have a mimosa right now. Or, I normally don't have chocolate cake for breakfast, but it is left over from last night. Or those bad decisions that later on when you're really, really struggling. Okay, so you begin to see how one thing leads to another, as the Fix, the band from the 80s said, one thing leads to another. And so I rose above it. I did my yoga yesterday. I did my Surya Namaskar, good morning sun. I'm thankful to be alive. Yoga, which, if you do that with that joy in your heart, it makes it so much better. So if you're doing these movements with awareness of breath, and gratitude is pouring out of your being, it's just raising up that whole field, your whole human biofield, the auric field that surrounds you just gets lifted, and you then begin to rise above that little blip of a radar in the cosmic reality that you're living in. So doing the shadow work, initiating your power. So for me, it's the yogic practices, it's the meditation, it's the pranayama, it's the breath. For you, whatever it is for you, I would be the last person on earth to tell you, this is the way to do it. Wear a bangle like me or do the kind of breathing. No, do what you do and what you feel good about. Do what you do best and do it well, particularly on those days. And then, as I mentioned, being grateful. Being grateful is huge. Being grateful is the great adjuster. It's the great equalizer, right? So that gratitude flowing from within your own heart, not just taking a mental note of things to be grateful for, but letting gratitude flow out. And now you're beginning to feel gratitude for the things that are in your life. And now you're beginning to, through these practices, empower yourself to rise above the haze. It's almost like when you're in an airport and when you're in that airport and you take off, what happens? You rise above the cloud cover. It's really gloomy down below, but when you come up above the cloud cover, what do you have? You have this beautiful blue sunny sky, right? right above the ceiling, right? That's what they call it in the terms of FAA, and in the airplane terms, they call it the ceiling. So once you get above the ceiling, then you realize, man, it's sunny up here. And that's what gratitude and love and doing good things and all those things will do for you as far as rising above the doldrums and the traction that the cosmic disturbances can throw your way. There's something that my mom always used to say to me back in the days when she was living on the earth with me and my brothers and our family and friends. She used to tell me, particularly about relationships, she would tell me, sometimes relationships are such where you get in a little disagreement about something and it can get pretty dark and get pretty bad. But she told me, she goes, if you just kind of wait it out, if you just kind of stick with it and just keep plowing forward, the sun will rise. She'd always say that, the sun will rise again. And, that was kind of relationship advice for me at the time, but I found that to be great lifetime advice, that this too will pass. And so that perseverance of, I'm just going to keep going. I'm not going to just get caught up in this. And one of the great teachers on this subject is Sri Yukteshwar, and he was the guru, the teacher of Paramahansa Yogananda, and I love what he has to say about this whole subject because in the book Autobiography of a Yogi, there was a time when Yogananda's guru told him, he said, "Hey, look, Yogananda, you need to go out and get yourself an astrological bangle." And Yogananda just was like, "Master, I don't believe in astrology." I mean, what? He's like many of us in the West. I mean, there's definitely a lot of people who believe in astrology, but there's a lot of us who are just like, I don't believe in that stuff. Come on, dude. Well, I want to read to you a couple of his key statements to Yogananda about this subject because I found them extremely powerful, and he deals with the whole idea of, if you don't believe in, astrology itself, where does that leave you in this realm of cosmic darkness? So when Yogananda said, "I don't believe in astrology," he went on to say, kind of touched on what I said in the beginning. He said, it's not a question of belief. He said, the only scientific attitude one can take on any subject is whether or not it's true. And then he goes on to talk about how gravity was true for quite a while. And he said, the cosmos would be fairly chaotic if its laws could not operate without the sanction of human belief. And I thought, that is so powerful, because when you think about the concept he's talking about, he's saying whether you believe it or not doesn't change the cosmic reality. Like, if you don't believe in gravity, that's fine. But if you jump off a building, you're going down. The cosmos is not looking for your agreement on something to determine whether or not it's true when it comes to the physical laws. But as we find out as we go on in this life and in this spiritual path, like Morpheus in the Matrix said, he goes, the rules can be bent and in some cases broken. And so on one hand, you'll hear a statement like this and you go, wow, that is enlightening. I get that. The laws aren't waiting for me to agree. They're just gonna execute and do what they do, whether or not I agree with it. And that's true. But as we go on, we find out in the Matrix that there are ways to not only bend, but to break. Oh, by the way, bending and breaking, one of the good reasons that I practice yoga is because I learn how to bend in order that I won't break. I thought of that this morning when I was doing my Surya Namaskar, my sun salutations. Okay, so the cosmos is not waiting for us to agree on these things. It just does what it does. But then he goes on and he talks about, what's the gist of the cosmos and these energetic things that come our way. He talks about, man struggling. He says, so long as man struggles with his mortality, he is affected by the myriad mutations of heaven and earth. He talks about how the stars have no conscious benevolence or animosity. They're just sending forth either positive or negative radiations. But I like that because he talks about the trap of fear of our own mortality. Have you ever noticed that the people who are more bound by physical things are oftentimes more afraid of their own death? And let me give you an example of how I believe this works. A friend of mine, we were talking about it. He's into nutrition and great guy. And he and I were talking about nutrition one day, and we're always sharing, I'll go to the Japanese market and find some new root that's got some powerful property in it. And I'll send him a text or a picture going, hey, check this out, man. I'm adding this to my tea. It's kind of fun. We kind of go back and forth like a tennis match, just throwing text back and forth and talking about those things. And one of the things I realized, though, as we were talking about health and wellness, I realized that at a certain point in my life, that my big push for health and wellness wasn't so much about the enjoyment of having the body feel good, but it was about a deep down dread of facing my own mortality. Think about that. That's something to chew on. Looking introspectively, because the fear of death keeps people imprisoned their whole life. That's why, spiritual teachers say, hey, if you really want to live, you just kind of die in order that you might live. And the idea is, if you're clinging to life, life will throw you off like an amusement park ride. But if you just let go, you'll have the time of your life. So sometimes it's best to die to your own ego in order that you can live in peace, knowing that there's no escaping it. We're all going down that path. It's better to come to terms with it and not be in that intense fear of death, because that puts us at resistance to the cosmic forces. This is how it works. I'm going to give you an example. When I was surfing as a kid, my brother told me, we went out on a big day and he coached me. And he said, hey, when the big waves come, no matter what you do, don't freak out. Do not freak out. And that was hard for me to, sorry, I have a cat walking on my soundboard here. Here comes the tail. That was pretty good. It's kind of like a shark fin going by. Okay, Delilah, you can just stay there. Don't keep, she's going to keep walking back and forth. She is. Now she's going back to the soundboard. This is great. Hey, this is a cosmic disturbance. Here's another cosmic disturbance, little sprinkle of water. See if I can get her to move on her way. So my brother said, hey, don't freak out. Don't freak out in the water when a big wave comes. And I never forgot that. And you know what I found out? And because later on in life, I became a surf photographer and I was swimming in the water, taking photos. And that if the photo you see, behind me here, is a photo I took years ago. But in my experience of being in big surf in Hawaii and Mexico and other places, I realized the fullness of my brother's warning and statement to me that day. I realized that when you tense up your body, when you try and fight it, that it only makes it worse. And this is how it works. When I got pummeled on big waves, I noticed that if I struggled, you stiffen your body, and guess what happens? The wave has something to push against. So when your body's stiff and you're fighting it, you will actually go down very deeply into the depths of the water. And if you don't fight it and you're soft and malleable, you just pop right up. Well, maybe not every time, but you come up a lot quicker and you use a lot less energy, and your nervous system doesn't get irritated, which brings up your heart rate and your demand for breath. Isn't that interesting? So this example that I have of surfing, I'm kind of thinking that it's a very, very good example of the cosmic waves of energy, because I was talking about the same thing. The waves of the ocean are simply that. They're waves of energy moving through the water, manifesting as a wave breaks. So the cosmic waves of energy come in to the stratosphere. And so when we fight, when we fear, and when we resist, that's when we make ourselves more possibly touched by those waves. Let's see here. I have someone coming online in a little bit. Let me read a little bit more before we get to our guest call. So Sri Yukteshwar talks about the cosmic reality of karma. He talks about how what you do in your life gets you to where you're at and what is sort of happening in your life. And he says, you've created that. You've created what you're dealing with in life. For the most part, you've created it. Even if you don't see the connection, you'll probably see it later. So, but the point is not so much you're getting paid back, you're sowing what you're reaping what you sowed, more than just saying it that way. What I want to say is, if you got yourself into it, you can get yourself out. And different spiritual paths have different ways of explaining that. But the point is, the bottom line is that all the spiritual traditions say that yes, you can get out one way or the other. And I think that's important. So this is probably one of the more potent parts of Yukteswar's discussion about the cosmic forces when he talks to his young devotee, Mukunda Paramahansa Yogananda. He says, the wise man defeats his planets, which is to say his past. So part of defeating the planets is defeating your past. Do you see the parallel that I was talking about before? I was saying, go do your shadow work. Find out what it is in your past that's troubling you, because if you can at least see it, you can defeat the planets and therefore defeat the disappointments of your past. So the wise man defeats his past by transferring his allegiance to what? From the creation, from the physical things, to everlasting spirit, eternal spirit, creator, God. The more he realizes his unity with what? Cosmic reality, spirit, the more he realizes that, the less he can be dominated by matter. This is all about being dominated by matter. Remember when I shared you my experience about going out and doing those things that I greatly regretted later? It's all about being dominated by matter for the most part. The soul is ever free. Your soul is free. It's deathless because it's birthless. So when you shift that identity from lower self, from ego consciousness, I'm looking left and right because I got cats attacking me. When you shift your perspective, your consciousness from ego consciousness to that higher universal consciousness, now guess what? Now you're living in your higher self, the part of you that is eternal, that was never really born. Your body was born, and your body will die. Whatever has a beginning must have an end, but whatever didn't have a beginning can never have an end. So once you begin to identify with that higher self, that's why I say, dig into your spiritual practices, pull out the Kundalini Shakti, get filled with the Holy Ghost, however you want to say it. Do those things why? In order that you completely saturate yourself in that state of being, because that is the victory over cosmic darkness. I really like that. And he says, man is a soul and has a body. You're not a body. You're a soul, and you just happen to have a body. So when you change that sense of identity from soul, from body consciousness to soul reality, then all those things, those compulsive patterns of earthly, domination, physical things, goes away. And it's a cure to spiritual amnesia. And the subtle fetters, he says, of environmental law become evident. So now you begin to see, okay, there's an environmental law out there. There's a full moon. There was a full moon a few nights ago. When one is coming, you go, oh, there's this subtle fetter that I sense in the cosmos right now. There's a full moon rising. I have the propensity within me to go out and make some bad decisions, right? Or good decisions. I love the people who just don't even focus on the bad decisions. And what do? They go out and they do ceremony. They do meditations, full moon meditations, full moon cacao ceremonies, etc., etc., etc. It's always better to shift gears and hang with the tribe that realizes the subtle fetters of the earthly existence and body domination. So I love that about Sri Yukteshwar and his conversation with his young devotee, Yogananda. So nevertheless, though, when I look back at all the times that I was a little more subject to the cosmic forces, I realized that, you know what? It's all good, though. Whenever I made those bad mistakes, and I know some of you out there may think back on some of those mistakes, and some of you may even have a hard time looking into that darker place, doing that shadow work. But the truth is, a lot of good comes out of purging. I think of those as purgative times. When I look back and I see the misery and the bad choices I made, the mistakes I made about these things, I realize it only in the end leads to good. There's some of you out there who are watching this podcast or listening to this podcast now, and as you look back, you might not only have some letdown feelings about decisions you made at certain times of your life, et cetera, but in reality, those experiences that weren't so hot made you dive deep into the present heaven now. Isn't that a gift? I'm not one to push the persona of God or the anthropomorphic representation of divinity. But if we need to do that to speak in those terms or to communicate something, I'll do it. And this is a time I would do it. I would say, thank God. Thankful that there is that deal, that exchange. Oh, let's see. I'll take your trash and here's your gems. That's kind of what that is, isn't it? If you look at your own life and all the bad decisions you've ever made and how good things come out of some of the worst things. What a deal. Thank God for that. That we can turn around through the grace that we've been given as very powerful beings, that we can turn it around and cross the finish line in glory with our heads lifted up in gratitude for the good opportunities in life. I love that. I keep coming back to my yoga class this morning. The wonderful Archana, she talked about, and I mentioned it just a little while ago, bending but not breaking. Bending but not breaking. Maybe I read a couple things from that yoga class this morning, because there was a very phenomenal number of things said about identity. We were looking at the sacral energy center, and we were doing asanas that opened up the sacral region. Orange. It's red for the root, and then orange for the sacral area, and then yellow for solar plexus. Those are the bottom three. Here's the identity. You are not your age. And you're not the size of the clothes you wear. I think that's really important for some people to realize that. As I get older, the first one really relates to me. You're not the size of the clothes you wear. You're not a weight. You're not the color of your hair. And by the way, you're not even your name or the dimples in your cheeks. Let's go from the physical to the metaphysical. You are the books you read and the words you speak. That's what you are. You are your croaky morning voice and the smiles that you try to hide. You're the sweetness in your own laughter and every tear you've cried. You're the songs you sing so loudly when you know you're all alone. Have you done that? I did that this morning on the way to my yoga class. I was singing some Foreigner because no one could hear, but that's what you are. You're that joy. You're the singer of those songs in the shower or in your car when you're all alone. You are the places that you've been to and the one that you call home. You are the things that you believe in. That's so important. Believe well. And the people whom you love. You are those people. You're the photos in your bedroom and the future. You are the future that you dream of. You're made of so much beauty, but it seems that you forget when you decided that you were defined by all the things that you're not. Gosh, that is such a powerful statement. When I think of that last phrase, it makes me think of, I know what some of you are thinking, the movie Contact with Jodie Foster. In the end, when she travels to Lyra and has that just surreal experience with what looks like her dad, but we find out later it's not. It was just something to make her feel comfortable as she had that contact. And he said, you're capable of so much beauty. And I think, wow, that is, it's so powerful and it's so real. And I'm just floored by it. Because, Streams of Light podcast, I decided a while back that I wanted to do this kind of selfishly for myself. Why? Because I wanted to use the podcast as sort of weights to work out my own spiritual muscles. I wanted to use this podcast to grow, to discover. I want people to share their experiences. I want to be someone who is on the path with other people. So, with a little bit of thought and a little bit of vision and intention, here I am. And there you are listening And the beautiful thing about it is that we're all here on this earth waking up together. We're all here waking up together. Did you ever think that maybe this life is about ascension, about awakening, more than it is about just what you had for dinner last night or where you went or whatever? There's something about awakening. I just feel like, a friend of mine said the other day, we were looking at pictures of animals. And there was a picture of all these animals going to school on a bus. It was really cute. It was a bus picture of all these animals, and they're like sitting in their seats and they're on their way to, well, doggy daycare, I guess, not school, but you get the picture. And the conversation was like, do you think these animals are awakening too? Oh, yes. Have you noticed? Have you noticed that this whole earth is on an upward path? It's not just humans. If anything, we think of ourselves as the highest on the chain. We've been doing more damage to this beautiful blue planet than any other creature, really, except for the dinosaurs, and that's only because we're burning them. But really, the truth is, we're all on a path of ascension and a path of awakening. And I am on the same path everyone else is. Just as I'm walking up this hill of ascension to Zion, I'm just looking at everything around me and I am marveling. You are not your body. I am not mine. There's something living inside of me, and there's something living inside of you. It's a soul essence. It's divinity. It's the breath of divinity. It's a really powerful thing. I'm very grateful you joined me today on Streams of Light podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. I'm Chris Anthony. Until next time, thanks for joining.